Welcome to Rexport Education. It seems everyone from globalists, elitists, career politicians, and the lying, corrupt corporate media just love talking about the environment. Global warming, mass extinction, melting ice caps. They can't go more than a few days without reminding you that we're all in trouble and we all need to act now. Reduce population, kill babies, euthanize yourself through assisted suicide. Yes, those are actual talking points of these environmental lunatics. And the one thing they all say the most is, you have to reduce your carbon footprint. But we know they are all full of it. I'm not talking about the science. In fact, I'm not going to challenge a single point on climate change. But what I am going to do is prove that these politicians, these activists and elitists, these phonies, and these pretend reporters are lying to you about the facts. They don't actually care about climate change at all. They aren't interested in changing things to fix environmental issues. We can all speculate on what their actual agenda may be, and it's probably at your expense. But for now, let me show you why they can't possibly care about the climate issue when they ignore these 9 key points that would solve the human carbon emission problem almost immediately. These are points that no one is talking about, and these are just points I came up with off the top of my head. I'm sure there are many more solutions that many of you could come up with too. And isn't it funny how readily available solutions are, and yet are not on the table for these activists? Let me show you what I'm talking about. But first, leave a like, subscribe, and comment to support the channel. Number 1. Work from home. Some estimates say that 80% of US employees work a desk job or a sedentary job. That's bad news for health, but also suggests that Americans are using far more office space than they need. The global impact of all the construction to build multi-story office buildings is astronomical, crowding cities, further taxing resources, and causing mass commutes, which pollute and kill local wildlife, all on a daily basis. But why do we need all those office jobs? Telecommuters became a norm for many in the office sector during the 2020 pandemic, proving with the technology we have today, it is no longer necessary for investment in office space. People can work from home and work more effectively since they don't have to spend extra hours every day commuting to the office, getting ready for work, buying office clothes, or buying takeout for lunch. Workers would have more energy, more money, more peace of mind. And employers would also save. Without those large office spaces, companies could save millions every year. This would also reduce the drain on the power supply, and less power consumption means less carbon. Imagine not having to spend all those extra hours commuting to work, not paying for all that fuel to get you there. Imagine not risking an accident on the freeway and the inevitable medical bills that would come with it, or the expense of having to get another car. Imagine not having to go for an oil change as often, or pay for new brakes and tires as often. Imagine not having to buy all those clothes you only wear to work, or childcare costs, or eating out so much. And with all your saving, there are also savings to our environment and infrastructure. Less traffic means the city pays less to maintain roads and bridges, and there will be less roadkill affecting the animal population. And with less traffic, there is less smog, meaning better air quality for all. With all these amazing benefits right at our fingertips, it's an unbelievable wonder that this isn't the #1 talking point for these two-faced global warming alarmists. This alone is enough to make you wonder if they are actually interested in the environmental problem at all. Why aren't there incentives to make this switch? I think we know why. You can already begin to see my point. I'm only 1 point in, and the implications of this simple change are far and wide. But let's have another. Number 2. Hydroelectric power. Hydroelectric power stations have come a long way in recent years. Low-cost, low-profile turbine generators are now being used to supplement power in villages around the world. These systems can be installed anywhere there is moving water. They're clean, renewable, and sustainable, with no negative impact to the local wildlife. Just think about it, a system with 100 small turbines running along the length of a river, powering homes, schools, manufacturing hubs. They could also be used in electrolysis, the process used to harvest clean hydrogen fuel. This method wouldn't require any of the environmental destroying mining practices and slave labor used to make solar panels. And it wouldn't kill the birds like the oil-consuming, non-recyclable blade nonsense of wind turbines. They also make energy day or night, whether there's wind or not, whether there is sun or not. Basically, hydroelectric is way more practical, more sustainable, and has way less downsides than any other power generating method. And it's scalable to any river, stream, creek, or other form of moving water.
His generator works even with the gentle flow of this tiny stream. The spiral blades are angled, so they rise slightly towards the upstream side. A 15-centimeter high metal plate blocks the stream. This makes the water run over the top of the plate and flow down through the spiral blades. The force of the water on the blades turns the turbine to generate electricity. This concept works anywhere there's flowing water, even if it's very shallow. Three, two, one, now!
What if you could generate power from your drains? Every time you take a shower or brush your teeth, wash your hands, or wash the dishes, there can be a turbine for that. We have the technology to make it happen, and it would greatly supplement the current power grid, even expand it to meet our ever-growing power needs. It's simple, it has no emissions, and they are cheap and easy to make. So, why then are we investing so much into wind and solar, when hydrogen and hydroelectric are very real prospects for much of the country? If we are actually trying to better our interaction with the environment and make better choices, why are these not even being discussed? Number 3. Self-sufficient home agriculture. With a major food crisis underway, one that is mostly manufactured by policymakers, it makes more and more sense to be self-sufficient in any way you can. That includes growing some of your own food. Self-sufficient hydroponic gardens are simple and easy to run. They don't require much attention or knowledge. You don't even need much light, but a few grow lamps. Now you can grow much of your own produce right at home, without taking up a lot of space, ensuring you get some healthy vitamins and nutrients to sustain you and your family. One other overlooked negative impact on the environment is the bad health epidemic in the US. We have some of the most unhealthy people in the world from bad agriculture and food processing practices. The US health industry is a $2.1 trillion industry, representing about 20% of the US GDP. These and our health have an impact on the environment, and we can solve it right at home. Home gardens can be made to use less water and far less soil, so its impact on the environment is incredibly small. But it will increase the levels of oxygen in your home and reduce the need for large farming operations, which destroy soil and natural ecosystems. During World War II, it was encouraged that every home have a small garden of their own, called a victory garden. These vegetable, fruit, and herb gardens were used to supplement the food industry so that there was more food available to sustain the troops during wartime. It also caused food prices to go down, allowing the military to spend more on other things for the war effort. Victory gardens were very successful. In 1943, there were more than 18 million victory gardens, and by the following year, the fresh produce was equal to all commercially grown vegetables. That's amazing! Bringing back such measures and encouraging more self-sustaining practices is a no-brainer when it comes to sustainable living and environmental health. And yet, no one in the environmental lobby is talking about it. Gee, I wonder why. Number 4. Drilling at home, energy independence. According to the Institute for Energy Research, in 2019 the US became energy independent for the first time since 1957, and a net exporter of energy product to the world, meaning that for the first time in 62 years we produced more energy than we used. We also had a slight decrease in energy usage during the same year, but it wasn't long after that tremendously beneficial achievement, which helped out millions of Americans, that it all was taken away from you, and our energy costs skyrocketed. And it didn't have much to do with a certain Eastern European war either. Oil prices were already up 60% before the war even got started, largely due to domestic policy. That same policy which made us more reliant on foreign energy sources. But as energy experts point out, this has done nothing to help the problem of global environmental issues. In fact, for all their talk of working to fix global warming, these policies directly make things worse. Foreign countries are really bad at processing their carbon emissions. In fact, there aren't many countries that do it better than the US. So depending on others to give us their oil means it will be more expensive and have a greater effect on the environment than if we just drilled our own. But if we are trying to avoid drilling our own oil for some reason, why buy from countries further away than other supplies, and from nations that don't care about the environment effects, and also want to destroy us? Doing so is more expensive, causes more greenhouse emissions, and enriches countries that end up polluting more than others. But we have several neighbors who have ample resources of oil we could be buying from, and control those measures more easily. So why are we actively making things worse for all Americans and worse for the environment? Number 5, hydrogen. Hydrogen fuel has been discounted by many, including such as Elon Musk, in recent years. However, the reasons for doing so seem to give an equal indictment of current alternatives, such as Musk's electric car. Not only is the mining of lithium bad for the environment, dangerous and expensive, but lithium battery technology isn't really well developed and not effective enough to justify changing from our current energy sources. But the most damning is that we still rely on 80% of the energy for those batteries to come from fossil fuels like coal. How then is that any different than the current method of harvesting hydrogen? But we don't need fossil fuels to make hydrogen. We can implement more hydroelectric generators, as we've discussed already, and also make shifts to nuclear sources of energy. New molten salt reactors are smaller, more efficient, far more stable, and safe than traditional nuclear reactors, and run on a fuel source that is much more available and easy to mine, thorium. China already has 2 such reactors in use. Why is the United States so far behind? California is shutting down its last reactor, even though the state continues to suffer blackouts and brownouts. The strain on their power grid, which wasn't designed to handle the addition of all the electric cars. Officials in California are saying you can have electric cars or AC. You can't have both. But hydrogen is more effective, cleaner to create using hydro turbines, and would require about the same level of infrastructure development that we are already currently building. And these cars would produce less harmful waste when they're retired, much less than lithium battery vehicles. And yes, I know, even hydrogen fuel cell cars use lithium batteries, but they don't require a giant heavy $10,000 to $15,000 battery with limited range and limited effectiveness in cold weather. So again, I have to ask, why are we not doing things differently? Why are we making things harder on ourselves? Isn't it becoming more and more obvious at this point? Number 6, private jets. According to Green Car Congress, private jets use up as much fuel in 4 hours as the average person does in an entire year. They also point out that those frequent users of private aircraft, with their combined wealth, could easily contribute to the cost of developing better alternative technologies. Hydrogen and electric aircraft are a likely alternative used in combination, and there has even been talk of a thorium reactor electric jet that could replace current energy use. They would have no emissions and not need refueling for over a year, but switching to a hydrogen fuel cell engine would be the quickest way to make private jets carbon-free, combined, of course, with the alternative technologies that already exist to generate the electrolysis process for hydrogen production. I guess their investments are more important. Number 7, bioreplacements, hemp, fungi, and bamboo. It is said that hemp, fungi, and bamboo can replace most textiles and building materials, and there are several companies developing their use for this purpose. But it hasn't been given any of the support from major companies or government, like other so-called renewable nonsense, which are less effective sources of clean tech. Why? Perhaps because, as many of us have long expected, they've never actually been interested in the environment and don't want to change things for the better. Oh, they definitely do want to change things, just not in the way that environmental activists think, and not in the way they say. It was leaked after the 2020 presidential election that since there wouldn't be much more focus on former President Trump, instead, corporate media such as CNN, the New York Times, and MSNBC would shift their focus onto climate change and put most of their energy into pushing that agenda. And they have. But they have not done so for the environment's sake. nor for your sake. Number 8. Recycling is a scam. Much of our American waste, marked for recycling, is shipped back to places like China, who usually made the products to begin with, and here the waste is meant to be processed and recycled. However, China tends to simply dump it straight into the ocean. Why are we relying so much on a country engaged in unrestricted warfare against the US, who produce the majority of our consumer goods at greater cost to the environment than we could produce on our own, at additional environmental costs because of shipping the product across the sea? And why are we shipping this waste right back to the same destructive, hateful country at more environmental cost, just to have them damage the planet even worse by throwing it in the ocean? We have the potential to create millions more jobs just by bringing home more manufacturing, recycling our own garbage, and doing so properly, adding waste collection netting to waterways at key points and processing it locally. This would improve American lives and economy, while at the same time reduce global emissions dramatically. It would punish nations that are doing a bad job. It would stimulate innovation. It would fix so many of the cultural problems being publicized. So why then are we moving further away from this solution? Number 9. Planned obsolescence. Planned obsolescence creates mass amounts of waste that end up filling landfills and polluting soil and oceans. The ocean absorbs more carbon than any other thing on Earth. The destruction of ocean ecosystems, largely due to policies around planned obsolescence, contribute greatly to dead zones and the decrease in the ocean ability to absorb greenhouse gases. Planned obsolescence is a menace to the environment and sustainable living. It also forces every person to be more dependent upon our economic system and the regulating entities which control it, namely big government and large corporations which act like government and control government. This in turn leads to less freedom, more control, and an ever-increasing need for the expansion of these entities. It's unsustainable. As they get bigger, they also use more resources and add greatly to the environmental crisis. The solution is to limit our government, promote self-sufficiency, get rid of useless products designed primarily to fill a landfill, and innovate to have technologies that make us independent and sustainable. But of course, this isn't being suggested, and we know why. The people pushing this Green New Deal and environmental narrative are only interested in expanding their influence, power, control, and their money. They will do anything for this, even use popular causes to get activists on their side and lobby the public on their behalf. They do this to convince us all to surrender our freedom and control, and to do so willingly. In the meantime, they attack our values, our history, our language, and our minds, so that we won't question their narrative. But the writing is on the wall. We have all the solutions to environmental safety at our fingertips right now. The technology exists, but we aren't being allowed to implement them. Those fighting for the environment on the side of the windmills, the solar panels, and the electric cars are fighting the wrong battle, and they're taking us all down with them. Stop the cycle. Break the chains. If you really want to fix the planet, here's a real place to start. Speaking for myself, until I start hearing more solutions like these I've been talking about, I'm not listening to one single activist, politician, or phony news agency again. Bunch of jackasses.